Hey there everybody! As you can tell by now, my channel is being messed with heavy duty. I've had multiple streams over the past few days, all cut abruptly, right in the middle of them, and it's quite obvious that I'm saying some things that some people out there don't want me to say. And one of those primary topics I was discussing in one of my videos that was cut, this was a video on Friday evening, which would have been February 16th, I was discussing the voice of God technology and some information surrounding that topic. So what we're going to do is I'm going to pre-record this video today, of course, because I can't necessarily live stream, and I'm going to run you guys through some articles and some information about this topic. Because, of course, if they don't want me talking about it, that's exactly what I'm going to do. So I'm going to talk to you about frequency, brainwaves, how our minds literally run at specific frequencies. We are beings of frequency, right? As Nikola Tesla said, secrets of the universe are in frequency, energy, and vibration. So we're going to talk about how we are beings of frequency, and we're going to talk about how the deep state, call them what you will, they have technologies where they can actually implant, not our conscious mind, we're not aware of it, but our subconscious mind with certain influences and programs with frequencies. That is this voice of God, sometimes called voice to skull technology. So let's get into it. We're going to cut now to the screen capture, and I'm going to show you guys some info about that. Alright guys, so let's go through all the articles that I found here for you on the subject. And surprisingly, when I first started researching it, what came up was quite a few mainstream media articles on it. So let's go through those before we go through a lot more of the information on it. And you can see here there was one by Washington Post, one by CNET, a couple here by Wired. And some of the intriguing things was that one, they were all written about 12 to 13 years ago. Washington Post published theirs in 2005. CNET was at the end of 2007. Same thing with Wired, end of 2007. And then the other one by Wired was mid-2008. So all of these around the same time, a little over a decade ago. And another thing was that the Washington Post article and the two Wired articles were all written by the same woman. Her name was Sharon Weinberger. So, you know, why kind of put the truth in plain sight, admit these things exist, publish these articles, and why is a lot of these articles being written by the same woman? You know, interesting questions to ponder. But let's actually get into the content and look at the narratives. You know, it's always good to look at the mainstream narratives and what they're putting out. So the one by Washington Post, there's a lot of good stuff that's in this one. And it's not necessarily poo-pooing or shunning any of these ideas. It's called extreme defense. And Sharon Weinberger goes on to write that these contractors that work with the CIA and the military, they get into some pretty interesting, you know, she's calling it non-lethal technologies, and they influence people. They actually use them on people. Down here, she actually writes in the article that a small wiry man wearing a CIA badge and a lanyard emblazoned with In-Q-Tel was at this conference that she was reporting on, and he stopped at the booth, paused to take a look, nodded approvingly, and picked up a business card before moving on. You know, if you've been researching any of the QAnon stuff, you'll notice that this comes up quite a bit in regards to CIA activity. So it's just interesting. A lot of this truth, a lot of these ideas and information that was put out there in the open in this article. And a lot of these technologies are discussing how some of them can knock you down, actually be like force field with electromagnetic frequencies. It's actually discussing how these technologies are based on a technique pioneered by Nikola Tesla. They're kind of like Tesla coils, but they use electronics to direct spark streams, knocking people over. Some of these talk about kind of stun phaser weapons, high-powered pepper balls, and, you know, crazy counterterrorism technologies. So you can just imagine these things are in existence. This article was written quite a while ago. So what's being utilized on the American public now? But this was, you know, the Washington Post one. Let's go into the CNET one. This one here is discussing them not necessarily in a militarily light, but more so by advertising companies, how they could actually use sound vibrations and microwave frequencies to send sound into your head, and how it could be used in a, of course, marketing sense, which yeah, it could very well happen. Seems pretty weird. I wouldn't want that, bothering me all the time, but this is kind of showing you this stuff exists. And then let's get into the ones by Wired here. Now remember, the same woman that wrote the one by WAPO, really getting into some of this tech, wrote the same ones about Wired. And here in this one by Wired, which was a couple years later, and just a day after this one by CNET, she kind of maybe saw the opportunity to discuss it again. She's talking about the voice of technology, weapon returns, and she actually, look, I just found here, she referenced her own article on the subject. Ha! But anyway, she's actually kind of poo-pooing it. So she's saying that a device that projects voices into your head to make you think God is speaking to you is the military's equivalent of an urban myth. And she's then down here saying that I'm thinking not. Does anybody think this thing will actually convince people God is speaking to them? Could it actually even exist? I'm thinking not. So it's weird, right? She goes and writes this expose on all this stuff, and then poo-poos her own work on it. It's weird. It's like, why is this narrative shifting? And then her next article on it, which was again for The Wired in 2008, is referencing it in a much different light. It's actually kind of taking it seriously. It's saying the Army's very strange webpage on voice-to-skull weapons has been removed. It was strange it was there, and it's even stranger it's gone. If you Google it, you'll see the entry for voice-to-skull device, but if you click on the website, the link is dead. The entry is still available on the Federation of American Scientists website. So yeah, it's just weird that her narrative is shifting. What talking points maybe is she getting? What 4 a.m. talking points? Who knows? But let's get into a little bit more of the science behind this all. Let's quit bothering with what the mainstream is saying. And here is the Army.mil website archive that she's referencing that was taken offline but archived. So voice-to-skull devices, definition/scope. It's saying here it's a non-lethal weapon which includes a neuroelectromagnetic device which uses microwave transmission of sound into the skull of persons or animals by way of a pulse-modulated microwave radiation. So it's essentially just sending a pulsed EMF into your subconsciousness. That was weird. Lights flickering there, you see. But anyway, and two, it's a silent sound device which can transmit sound into the skull of persons or animals. Note, the sound modulation may be voice or audio subliminal messages. One application of V2K is used as an electronic scarecrow to frighten birds in the vicinity of airports. But of course, it goes far more sinister and deeper than that. Check this out, audio subliminal messages. So it's saying here, it's not shooting it into your consciousness. You're not aware of these messages or these influences coming in, but it's on your subconscious level. And now let's look into the Wikipedia archive. Again, it's always good to look at what they're saying, the spin they're trying to put onto it. But Wikipedia is calling it a microwave auditory effect. That's exactly what it is. Not consciously auditory, but subconsciously. And it's also known as the microwave hearing effect or the Frey effect. And they're saying it consists of audible clicks induced by pulsed microwave frequencies. In 1961, the American neuroscientist Dr. Alan Frey studied this phenomenon and was the first to publish information on it. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a sec. But down here, conspiracy theories. I like this one. Numerous individuals suffering from auditory hallucinations and all these things, other mental illness, have claimed the government agents use form of mind control technologies and refer to it as voice-to-skull or V2K. So, and then here it mentions CIA's MK Ultra project and the use of psychotronics. So if Wikipedia is trying to call it false, it's real. And why would the Army have a website on it, even in 2004, if it's fake? So let's get into then a little bit more truthful research on the subject. I found some articles and actually some patents that we'll check out and get into on it. When I first started looking past the mainstream stuff, and found, a couple of third-party websites. This one was by Oregon Blasters. I don't know who runs this website. It's probably a woman's blog, or man's blog she just uses to get their thoughts out into the public and try to help the consciousness. But this article was called The ELF God by Sherry Schreiner, and she's talking really about how people are manipulated into doing things and looking at this in a very serious light. This article was probably published, it doesn't say, but around the same time frame, maybe 10 years ago, because it's referencing Columbine and the DC sniper. But it's seriously saying, hey, these MK Ultra people are patsies that are mind controlled and influenced and programmed to do these things. So her research is good because it actually comes up with quite a few patents. This ELF technology, ELF meaning extremely low frequency in the electromagnetic spectrum, right there, and it mimics brain waves. And we'll talk about brain waves in a sec, but let's look at these patents. So this patent here is a patent that was made in the late 80s, and it's actually called Silent Subliminal Presentation Systems. And this kind of scientifically describes exactly what I was saying, how microwave frequencies can be pulsed into our minds. This one here, apparatus and method for remotely monitoring and altering brain waves, so they can actually influence the literal frequencies that are produced by your brain, and it regulates. So these things do exist. It's not some conspiracy theory, crazy paranoid subject. These things are very real. And let's now talk about brain waves. So that's a little bit of good background before we move on. What are brain waves? Well, our brain waves are resonant frequencies that our brains emit, run on. And it has different ranges in the extremely low frequency range that coincide with different levels of conscious awareness. So you have different levels, waiting for this picture to come up here, called the beta, alpha, theta, delta, and there's another one called gamma range that they don't have up here. But in the delta range, those are very low. They're associated with deep, dreamless sleep. And then you go all the way up to beta, and gamma would be up here. But that's a very high conscious state. That's in the approximate 30 to 40 hertz range, not a little higher than that. That's when you're hyper-conscious and even anxious or taking in a lot of information from your environment. So there's a range that our brains will regulate on depending on our levels of awareness, and they can actually influence that. So in the EMF spectrum, they can utilize a lot of these microwaves, higher frequencies, to influence the lower frequencies. They modulate them, or they can entrain our brainwaves to certain states. And I then found a few articles here by Bibliotheca Pleiades. Now, here's a quick tip. If you're truth searching, any subject you're looking for instance, voice of God, or could be 0 point energy, or MK Ultra, or whatnot, just type in this website, Bibliotheca Pleiades, that word and your subject in the box, and you'll come up with a bunch of great articles on the subject. These are the ones that I found about voice of God. This one here, devices that talk to the human mind, total individual control technology. It's kind of like an amalgamation of articles from around the web that are on these subjects. This one here was just a article from somewhere by somebody, and it references a lot of good work. So this website is just, like I said, Bibliotheca Pleiades is an amalgamatory website that brings in everything. And let's talk about these couple. So new devices that talk to the human mind. This one was written in 1999. And then this one here was actually fairly recent, 2017. This one actually gets into this actually looking like a document from the NSA admitting these technologies exist, and the work of Dr. Alan Frey, like we mentioned, where he actually would use electricity and carrier frequencies and different power levels to influence our consciousness. And then it talks a little bit about bioamplification, which sends signals that don't interfere with radio or TV appliances, extremely hard to detect, but can influence us. And then it's discussing some of the patents that I showed you guys as well. So great article, I'll share with you below. And then this one here, total individual control technology. So this one is saying how there's actually technology that can read your mind, program your mind with thoughts, and like we were saying, induce emotional states in you, pain, hate, fear, making these brain waves behave a certain way and probably influence certain parts of your brain. And then it's saying how, discussing how they would actually know you based upon your DNA resonance. So all of our DNA resonates at certain frequencies. I was kind of mentioning this the other day in my video, and that's one of the reasons why the pharmaceutical system is so important, because they're trying to create a database in essence, and they want your DNA to be able to know you a whole lot more so and influence you with these technologies. So they get your resonant frequency, then they still recording. Okay, that was real weird. Man, my internet's doing weird things too, guys. Hey, anyway, let's keep going through this. So there's the Bibliotheca Pleiades articles. And again, I'll link those down below. And whenever you're researching a subject, you want to know some more actual truth on it, type that in with the subject. And then here's a question that Corey Good had actually answered on the subject. And it says here, can you tell us more about this technology called the voice of God, where people hear voices in their heads? And on his website here, he says, yes, this technology uses bioneural interface methods that have evolved over the decades since it was developed. And the older ones can actually focus on an individual in a crowd. And after a certain range, the effect is lost. But the more recent ones can actually influence an individual from a drone or a satellite. So that goes much in line with what we were learning from Q, in that they use these classified satellite technologies and mobile devices to send that frequency much more specifically through people. And that could be how they're, in our digital age here, in our highly technological age we're getting into, they're much more able to influence people who are mentally ill, who aren't whole individuals and taking care of themselves mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally. They can influence them much more so to do these nasty things, and they have much more targeted technology. And of course, people are so much more toxified and ill. So again, guys, that's why it's so important to keep yourself healthy physically in all layers of who you are, because if you're not, that's how they influence you. They literally do, and take you away from your higher self. So understand that, guys. That's why I preach on that subject. And then lastly, what I'm actually going to do is, here's an episode of Cosmic Disclosure with Corey and David Wilcock on the Voice of God technology. I am going to make this free for 72 hours. I'm going to utilize a guest share on this, and I will post the link down below in the description of this video. So if you want to watch more on it, watch that half-an-hour episode. I will, of course, link these articles by Bibliotheca Pleiades and these patents as well. So pretty crazy, right? These things actually exist. Technologies that can influence you, send pulsed frequencies into your subliminal thoughts, and it's just weird, isn't it? And it's kind of scary. But at the same time, it's not scary. It's actually empowering. It's liberating, because by understanding this kind of information, that you have brain waves, your mental state operates in different frequencies associated with your consciousness, then you can alter that. You can change that yourself. and keep yourself in certain states that won't allow them to influence you. And also by understanding this, it's extremely empowering because then you know, wow, if I keep myself healthy, whole, grounded, if I focus on balancing all layers of who I am, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, then again, they can't influence you. They can't mess with you. Whatever they're trying to do subliminally, whether it is advertising or it is something far more sinister and directed, they won't be able to accomplish their goals or their agendas. So that's it, guys. Hope you enjoyed that video on the voice of God technology. And that's just a quick call to action there to keep yourself healthy and on the right path. That's why I'm such a preacher about that subject. Again, go check out all those articles, all the links I'm going to have in the description below the video. And make sure you go check out my second YouTube channel on health called Conscious Strength. Peace.